You think you have a habit. What you really have is an ancient hunger. This isn't about willpower, it's about a soul abandoned so long ago you forgot its voice. Carl Jung didn't call addiction weakness. He called it a substitute for legitimate suffering. A false god that whispers, "I'll make the void quiet, just give me your silence." And you obey, not because you want the high, but because you're tired of pretending to feel alive. You scroll, you drink, you disappear, but not because you're broken, because no one taught you how to grieve your own erasure. This is the truth no one says out loud. You're not addicted to dopamine. You're addicted to the absence of meaning, and every relapse is a ritual of forgetting. But what if that pain you keep numbing isn't your enemy? What if it's the last honest part of you left? He reaches for the bottle like it's a prayer, but he's not praying for joy. He's begging for silence. Not the kind that soothes, but the kind that buries. Burial of what? Not pain, but the ghost of who he used to be. Every sip is a confession. I don't know how to come back. Men think they're avoiding agony, but it's presence they've abandoned. You ignored the first signs, the sleep that wasn't rest, the smile that wasn't real. Now the body speaks in cravings, the soul whispers in hangovers. Each relapse isn't rebellion, it's the echo of an unlived life. You don't miss the drink. You miss who you were before the fracture. The lie is this, that alcohol seduced you, but it wasn't the bottle, it was the quiet. That sacred moment where everything paused, no masks, no roles, no weight. And in that pause, your pain finally made sense, if only for a second. You didn't get addicted to substance, you got addicted to the truce. It starts small, a nightcap, a scroll, a distraction, but what you're really consuming is forgetfulness. Not to erase pain, but to mute the guilt of ignoring your own soul. You betrayed your own silence, and now you chase anything that mimics it, even if it poisons you slowly. Men don't talk about emotional starvation. They perform functionality, but the body remembers. The gut tightens when the void returns, and the mind lies. Just one more hit of forgetfulness. But the heart knows. It beats heavier when you're empty, because deep down, you remember what presence used to feel like. There was a version of you before the numbing, not perfect but real. Still flawed, still afraid, but alive. That man didn't crave silence, he spoke it. Now he's a shadow, a function, an echo of someone you buried to survive. You didn't kill him. You just stopped listening. The hangover isn't from the substance, it's from the silence breaking again. You wake up not with regret, but with remembrance. Of all the things you wanted to say but never did. Of all the pain you never let scream. You call it recovery, but maybe it's resurrection. And here's the truth. You weren't numbing life. You were numbing the ghost of yourself, the one still trapped beneath the mask. And every relapse is his whisper, "I'm still here." He didn't want pleasure. He wanted absence, not escape, erasure, a brief disconnection from the identity he couldn't stand anymore. The addiction was never to the substance. It was to not existing. Most men think they're chasing dopamine, but they're chasing amnesia, a break from the mirror, from the weight of always being fine, always handling it. Behind every ritual is a simple cry. Let me forget who I've become. Because sometimes forgetting feels safer than healing. It started with discipline, pushing through, stoicism, strength, silence, but the silence grew teeth. It began to bite back. Now you light the match each night just to burn the memory of mornings. You're not avoiding pain. You're avoiding remembering when it started. Your poison of choice doesn't matter. Drink, porn, noise, control. It's not the object, it's the function. A burial ritual, a grief in disguise. Each use, a shovel. Each day, a deeper grave. That version of you, the child, the dreamer, the boy who felt too much, he didn't vanish. He got abandoned at the altar of masculinity. You stood over him with a knife called toughness and cut out your softness. Now you crave numbness because it keeps his voice quiet. You call it a bad habit, but it's a sacred routine, a ceremony of forgetting, not your failures, but your forsaken truths. Like the moment you stopped asking for comfort and started earning your place in a world that never intended to see you. There's a reason you relapse after moments of clarity, because clarity reminds you of who you used to be, and the weight of that memory crushes the chest. So you reach again. Not for pleasure, but for oblivion, a short holiday from the soul. You don't relapse, you return to the place where you buried your voice, to the echo of a scream no one heard. And if addiction is a homecoming, then healing is learning how to live with memory, not run from it. He was never weak, just invisible. He carried breakdowns in silence, called it strength. But inside, he was screaming into a void that never answered. Addiction didn't begin with pain. It began with no one watching him fall. There's a lie men are taught early, that pain unspoken is power. So he swallowed grief, smiled through loss, kept breathing through betrayal. But every buried emotion becomes an infection, and the substance, just a desperate antibiotic for a soul left unseen. He didn't pick up the bottle because he was reckless. He picked it up because no one ever said, "I see you." Not the man he pretended to be, but the one unraveling behind his eyes. He turned to anesthesia because honesty was too dangerous. And silence. It became his only loyal witness. There are moments a man wishes someone had asked, "What are you carrying?" Not out of pity, but presence. Instead they said, "You're so strong." He wanted to scream, "No, I'm just alone." But silence had already become his language. The drug was never the answer, but it listened. It held him when the world demanded performance. It numbed the ache of having no one to break in front of. It became the mother, the friend, the priest he never had. But its comfort was counterfeit, and its love came with chains. Most men don't need advice. They need a witness, someone who doesn't fix them, just doesn't flinch. But in a culture that rewards composure, collapse is exiled. So the addict collapses in secret, over and over, and calls it coping. He didn't fail recovery. Recovery failed him because it treated the symptoms, not the solitude. It offered steps and slogans, but not sacred presence. Healing doesn't happen when the pain stops. It happens when someone stays while the pain speaks. You weren't weak, you were unheld. By the world, by her, by the man in the mirror who never learned how to hold himself. Addiction isn't a flaw, it's an unanswered cry. And healing begins not with strength, but with being seen, fully, in ruin. He doesn't fear pain. He's lived with it for years. It became background noise. What terrifies him is memory, the exact moment where the fracture began, the first betrayal, the first dismissal, the first time he swallowed the scream. That's what he runs from. The origin, not the aftermath. There's a certain weight in carrying strength that was forged in trauma. The world applauds your composure, but never asks what it cost you. You became resilient, not by choice, but because no one noticed the collapse. So you told yourself, "I'm fine," even as the scar kept whispering, "Remember me." The substance doesn't seduce you. It protects you from yourself, from the moment your innocence died and you told no one, from the flashbacks you disguised as, "I'm just tired." It gives you a pause, not from pain, but from the memory of who you were before it all broke. Trauma doesn't shout, it echoes, it doesn't beg, it haunts. Every sip, every scroll, every ritual of escape is a negotiation with ghosts. You bargain with your past. Let me forget just tonight. But memory doesn't forgive silence. It waits. His first addiction wasn't a drug. It was pretending. Pretending he was okay. Pretending he wasn't drowning. Pretending that what happened didn't matter. And every time he said, "It's not a big deal," something sacred went missing. The mind isn't broken. It's filled with tombs. Places he buried versions of himself just to survive. He can walk through a crowd and still smell the room he cried in as a child. Not because he's weak, but because memory is sacred, and sacred things don't die quietly. They wait for stillness, then they rise. You don't need more therapy. You need a rite of remembrance, not a diagnosis, a reckoning. The truth isn't that you can't handle life. It's that life handed you wounds too early with no one to name them. He's not afraid of pain. He's afraid that if he remembers everything, he'll collapse. But what he doesn't know yet is this: the collapse isn't death. It's the beginning of resurrection. He looks composed, focused, reliable, the kind of man people depend on, but never ask if he's okay. He organizes everything: his time, his words, his image. But what he can't organize is the hunger behind his eyes, because that hunger isn't for success. It's for permission to be human. Perfectionism isn't discipline. It's self-abandonment in a tuxedo. He created a character the world would applaud. A man so controlled, even his grief wore a suit. But deep down, he's starving for something real. And terrified, he's forgotten what that even means. You think your control proves mastery, but it's not mastery, it's escape. Escape from the part of you that still feels unworthy unless he's achieving something. You don't schedule your life because it helps. You do it so you don't have to feel it. Because stillness would expose the void. The functional man isn't the healed man. He's just the best at hiding his exhaustion. He shows up on time, pays the bills, smiles in meetings, but inside there's a child waiting to be told, you don't need to earn your right to rest. And that's silence. It's killing him slowly. His routines are sacred, not because they bring joy, but because they keep him from breaking. He lifts weights so he doesn't lift his emotions. He controls calories, not because he's vain, but because it's one thing in his life that doesn't leave. The obsession isn't with the body, it's with not unraveling. Validation became oxygen. He never got it freely, so now he chases it quietly, through productivity, reliability, image. Every task completed is another brick in the wall that keeps his shame from surfacing. He's not working for wealth. He's working to avoid the confession, I don't know how to love myself without achievement. Control is seductive because it gives the illusion of peace. But real peace isn't tight. It doesn't need applause or spreadsheets. It looks like crying without guilt, resting without proving, saying I can't without shame. And that's the kind of freedom he was never taught to value. You don't want control. You want liberation from the lie of composure, from the image that won applause but cost you your softness. Because perfection doesn't protect you, it isolates you. And the moment you drop the act, your real self begins. He didn't want to escape life, he wanted life to mean something. But when every day feels like repetition wrapped in responsibility, escape becomes sacred. Not for thrill, for a pause from the weight of pointless motion. Because what hurts more than pain is living without purpose. They called him lazy, distracted, undisciplined, but they never asked what he was running from. Not fear, but futility. He scrolls not because it entertains him, but because silence exposes the void. The kind of silence that whispers, why are you even doing any of this? He tried the formulas, goals, systems, vision boards, but none of them touched the deeper ache. Because when the soul is hungry for meaning, strategy feels like starvation. You don't escape through dopamine, you escape through despair. And despair wears the mask of routine. He became productive, but not present. He got shit done, but never felt alive. Because ticking boxes is just performance when the man inside feels like a ghost. And eventually, he stopped chasing joy and settled for numb. Because numb doesn't ask questions. Addiction isn't indulgence. It's protest, a quiet rebellion against a life that offers function without soul. You don't binge to feel good. You binge to not feel the absence of good. The vacuum that modern life pretends isn't killing men quietly. And in that vacuum, comfort becomes your god. What you call bad habits are really rituals, not of laziness, but survival. Because when existence feels like a hangover you never earned, the substance becomes a lullaby. You're not chasing highs, you're escaping the weight of having no why. And that's not addiction, that's existential grief. You weren't weak for reaching for relief. You were starving for depth, for direction, for something sacred enough to bleed for. But no one told you that purpose isn't found, it's forged in fire. And until that fire returns, numbness will always feel like home. The enemy isn't the drug, it's the vacuum that made you need it. Because when meaning disappears, anesthesia becomes mercy. But here's the truth. Even numbness can't silence the soul forever. Did you enjoy the content and it made a difference for you? Click on Super Thanks and support our work. He didn't fall in love. He fell into silence, the kind that wrapped around his chaos and made him forget, just for a while, that he was unraveling. She wasn't a person. She was a pause, not for the heart, but for the ache beneath it. You said she saved you, but what she really did was delay you from the real work, from the reckoning, from the mirror. You didn't love her. You needed her to drown your questions, the kind of questions that sound like, what have I become? Her touch was a drug, not because it thrilled you, but because it muffled the scream. She became your ritual, your refuge, your replacement for self-reflection. And when she left, the pain wasn't heartbreak, it was withdrawal, from the comfort of not having to confront yourself. You told yourself she was different, but really, she was familiar. She played the same role as the bottle, the scroll, the distraction, a beautiful interruption to a truth you were too tired to face, that you were still bleeding and no one was coming to bandage you. She didn't destroy you, she just left you alone with the wound again. And that's when the real collapse happened, not when she left, but when the silence returned, because you remembered what you buried, not her, but the pain that came before her. You weren't addicted to her love. You were addicted to the way she helped you forget. And the tragedy is, she probably thought she was healing you too. But healing doesn't happen when someone loves your mask. It happens when someone stays after the mask breaks. She wasn't your salvation. She was your sedation. You used her smile to anesthetize your past. But no amount of affection can resurrect a man who's still hiding from himself. And eventually, the truth returns, louder than her absence. The heartbreak wasn't hers. It was the ache you carried long before she arrived. The ache that said, I don't know how to be whole. And now that she's gone, you're left with the only question that matters. Can I face the wound without her? He didn't shut down because he's fragile. He shut down because truth roared louder than his armor could contain. Every addiction, every escape, every silence was a confession. I can't hold this anymore. Not because he lacked strength, but because that strength was never meant to carry a lie. A lie called, I'm fine. His identity became armor, not selfhood, survival. The provider, the rock, the reliable man. But none of those roles left space for him to be real. So he collapsed, slowly, respectfully, where no one could see it. Numbness isn't apathy, it's protection. From the avalanche of truths you've buried under image and obligation, you learn to survive by silence. Now that silence is suffocating you, and the only thing louder than the pain is the voice you keep muting. It's not that you can't feel, it's that feeling would break the persona, the one you built to be accepted, admired, needed. But that persona was forged in abandonment, not love. And every year you wore it, the real you faded further. You don't avoid emotion because you're cold. You avoid it because you remember what happened the last time you opened up. The betrayal, the dismissal, the echo of man up. So now you keep it all in and punish yourself when it leaks out. That's not weakness, that's ungrieved history. Your numbness is not failure, it's your soul asking, can we stop pretending now? Because if truth is the flood, then numbness is the dam. And that dam is cracking. Not because you're breaking, but because you're awakening. They told you to toughen up, but real toughness isn't control. It's confrontation with your ghosts, with your silence, with the part of you that still bleeds under the smile. You numb not to escape. You numb because no one ever taught you how to grieve without disappearing. You aren't broken. You're awakening beneath the anesthesia. And what comes next won't be clean or fast or easy, but it will be real. And real is what you've been dying for. So what now? What do you do with this truth? Now that the anesthesia is wearing off, you've spent years trying to feel better, but maybe it was never about feeling better. Maybe it was about feeling less human. But the numbness didn't kill your soul. It just buried it beneath masks, habits, distractions, and survival roles. And now you're remembering that your pain wasn't weakness. It was your soul's way of saying, I'm still here. So ask yourself, what if your addiction wasn't a flaw, but a forgotten ritual? What if every relapse was a sacred message you refused to read? And what if everything you were chasing in silence was actually your own voice calling you home? Because if Jung was right, your suffering isn't the end, it's your initiation, and the man who dares to listen becomes the one who no longer needs to run. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and keep walking this path of brutal self-knowledge and emotional freedom. If this spoke to the part of you that's still quietly breaking, the next video goes deeper. Jung didn't see addiction as weakness. He called it a spiritual disease, a sacred disorder with a hidden purpose. Let's go there. Let's